Hello, everyone. My name is Joe Riley. I'm part of the Ocean Prototype Nights alongside Lisa Cartwright and Nan Renner. We are joining you tonight from the opening of the UCSD Design and Innovation Building, which sits on Kumeyaay land. Tonight is episode 2 of the Ocean Prototype Night series, titled Canoes, Conservation, Computation, and Community. This series is supported by the Getty Pacific Standard Time, the UC San Diego Division of Arts and Humanities, the Birch Aquarium at Scripps, the UCSD Visual Arts Department, Kosei Kumeyaay Market, and the Chamorro Cultural Organization, Chelu. I'm pleased to introduce our speakers for tonight's panel. First, we will hear from anthropologist Mariana Mimi George, who joins us tonight from Taumako in the Solomon Islands, and will discuss the Vaka Taumako project. Then we will hear from Sakman Mario Borja, a master Sakman sailing canoe builder, Chamorro elder, and engineer. Artist, technologist, and educator Simon Penny will share with us the seafaring design project Orthogonal. And then we will hear from Kumeyaay educator and tribal singer, Dr. Stan Rodriguez of the Santa Isabel Band of the Ipe Nation, alongside Kilma Lattin of the Palo Band of Mission Indians, and Catherine Ang, and Talon Cooper, please excuse me, sorry, of Ourworlds, which is an immersive media project. Together, they will share their recent work on Ha Kwaiyo, which are Kumeyaay watercraft. Thank you very much, and Mimi, it's all over to you.
Yep.
Okay, there you go.
I'm coming. Whoops. Okay. Are we here?
Play from start.
Play it from the start. Oh, I can begin. Aloha tatou. Yao noho ika moku kawaii. Hello, everybody. I'm dwelling here at the island of Kauai. And I thank you for this opportunity to show you some of the ancestral wisdom of Proa design and materials. I hope you took the opportunity to watch at least some of the 2 We the Voyagers films there at the space. I will mostly show images that are not in the films as I talk about features of Proa design, and I will be pointing out how the traditional materials greatly increase the performance and the sustainability of the design. When Europeans arrived in the Pacific, most of the voyaging vessels were Proa design. Europeans struggled to understand the design and how Proa worked. This painting shows some Fijian drua sailing around a dry reef. Even small proa were faster, could sail more upwind, could carry more cargo and people than European vessels, and they could sail over shallow reefs right onto the beach. All proa have one main hull that is double-ended, so the vessel can sail equally well in either direction. When a proa changes ends, changes which is the front end and the back, the sail must be adjusted to sail in the opposite direction. Sakman Mario has been showing this process there in the hall, and Simon Penny will explain it in his PowerPoint presentation. For now, let's look at what Proa design consists of structurally In addition to that main hull you see, this Papua New Guinea vessel has a float that is outrigged from the main hull on this side of the main hull. Much has been said about double hulls, like Hokulea, the Okeanos vessels, and others that are made with modern materials and methods and designs that were taken from European explorers. They are all catamarans, which means they have two hulls of the same length. Proa were either asymmetrical double hulls, which means they have one shorter hull than the other, like this one in the diagram, or they have massive outriggers meant for deep sea passages. This Marshall Islands vessel is a proa with a massive outrigger. These Mailu vessels of Papua New Guinea sometimes join together 4 or more hulls when they needed that to carry their huge cargoes of ceramic pots. The sails on many proa have an exaggerated long-armed shape. Some of the longest arms on sails are seen on these Mailu vessels. In this 1906 photo of a proa of the type named Tapuke, the arms are even longer in proportion to the body of the sail than the Mailu sail. This sail is a symmetrical shape. It's not a so-called crab claw shape. The name crab claw suggests the shape is lopsided like a crab's claws. Maybe we should call this shape a claw to avoid saying crab claw. Or we can call it a bird wing shape, which is symmetrical side to side like a bird's wings. In this photo, we see the massive outrigger on this Tapuke. Because outrigger designs have only one big hull, only one big tree and a lot less work is needed to make one. Notice in this picture that the man closest to us standing seems to be standing on water. The main hull is not visible. A required design feature of Tapuke is a riser box between the hull and the crossbeam. In this 2002 photo, you can see the riser box clearly. When properly loaded, the main hull sails 90% submarine on a Tapuke, but the crew and the cargo are high and dry. The riser box does that. Today, when two hulls are submarine, it is called swath design, short waterplane twin hull. Indigenous voyaging vessels are people, not things. The Taumako culture hero is Lata, the first person to build and sail a Tapuke. The long curved tips of the sail are Lata's arms held overhead to catch the wind. The paramount chief of Taumako here is recognizing his ancestral sail, Lata's sail, on the petroglyph in Hawaii. This diagram names 37 of the main parts of a Tapuke. Each part is made from a different tree or plant and is prepared in different ways. People care for the needed plants through many generations. Planning is done for many years before anyone begins to build a proa. Every plant, animal, tool, and laborer must be ready, and agreements have to be made between those responsible for perpetuation of each resource so that all will be available for their descendants. For years, old people and children make coconut fiber cordage. After all that is done, the Paramount Chief of Taumako, Closo Kavea, asks you, what's the first step for actually building a tapuke? And I'm going to tell you I'm going to show you the answer. Plant the gardens, because that video is not going to work for me. Plantations of sweet potato, kumara. Timing of the work to breadfruit harvest assures that there will be plenty of food. For earth ovens that are made for the feasts that are served to the workers every day they work. The felling of the main hull is shown in both the We the Voyagers films. So I'm showing you here the buttress of a tree that is cut, just the buttress, not the tree, for a panel in the riser box. This vine is used for some of the lashings of the outrigger and for emergency lashings at sea, and for these windlasses that hold the main hull to the riser box, to the cross beams. That tripartite structure is held together from the inside by these windlasses. Coconut fiber rope is used on the inside and outside of the riser box and the other parts. Pandanus is the plant used for making the sail. Girls and women weave the panels for the sail. Boys and men loft the shape and sew the panels together. Here they are preparing to sew the bolt rope, which goes along that moon shape between the tips of the sail, between the arms. And here they're sewing the bolt rope into that folded over panel. These men are lashing Lata's hands, which are the tips of the sail. And these men are making the booms. Each boom has two sections. And the thinner sapling used at the top third of the boom is thinner and more flexible than the bottom section. Here they're lashing them together. Now they're together. They'll tie on the sides of the sail, load the sail onto the vessel, and test the shape in the wind. The properties of pandanus and the craft of the sail makers result in flexibility. You see how the arms are taking different shapes now as the symmetrically constructed arms change in response to the wind. Some claw shapes with shorter arms have been measured in wind tunnels, and always they measured as more efficient in capturing wind force than any modern sails, both with a side wind or with the wind from behind, and 90% as efficient with close on the wind. The weave of the panels in the belly of the sail both open and close in response to the wind. those flexible boom sections at the end of the sail bend over in stronger wind. And they actually collapse and self-reef when the wind is dangerously strong. I do not have a picture of them folded over from dangerous wind, but you can see these bending. So the design depends on materials, on the artisanal knowledge and skills, and on the cultural commitment of ethical stewardship of the resources. So I thank you for listening. I look forward to any questions or comments in the Q&A session. If we have a minute now, we can do a question. And I will be followed by Sakman Mario, who will tell you about the ancestral mathematics of Proa Design in the case of the vessel type named Sakman. Do we have time for a question? Oh, I just see we just have, yeah, we
I think
5 minutes. According to my watch. Does anybody have a comment?
You're right on time, Mimi.
Okay, it's 5:20 or 7:20.
Yeah,
I have 5 minutes, yeah?
you do? Oh,
Yep.
you didn't tell me.
Yeah, we started at 5 after.
Oh, look at you.
Anybody want to say anything? Otherwise, I yield.
Mimi, I would like to get the dimensions of that canoe so we can look at the embedded mathematics perhaps in that canoe that you supervised. Please.
Well, I did not supervise any, but I can tell you the one outstanding one that Taumako people are happy for people to know, which is that the length of the booms on the sides of the sail, you know, from the tips down to where the sail steps on the hull, that length is exactly the same length as the length of the main hull. I can also tell you that the lengths of the floats on the outrigger vary a little bit. I've seen some that are just about half the length of the hull and others that are 2/3 of the length of the hull. But what they do is add floats to the sides of the central float, the ama, as many floats as needed to match the cargo that they're carrying.
Mimi, I wanted to just make an observation. I was really impressed to see those what you've referred to as windlasses, and those are referred to in the biz as Spanish windlasses. But
Yeah, some people say Chinese windlasses, so I just say windlasses.
good, yeah. No, it's interesting because it's a question. It's a matter of the sorts of practices that emerge when you're actually handling the stuff. Once you've twisted a thing and you've noticed that it tightens up, it's one of those ideas that that makes sense. So that's very interesting to see.
Yes, it is, and it doesn't show from the outside. On the diagram I showed you, there's a line pointing somewhere, and you don't know, it says inside, but you don't see the inside. So there are 6 of these, 3 on each side of the, or on each end, I should say, of the riser box.
Yeah.
There are other lashings that are not to be seen ever, that got covered up by parts of the structure that have to do with the qualities of the wood, of the material being used, and the stresses that they will undergo. There's a lot here. There's a lot of detail. There's 150 parts. They're almost all made from different stuff in different ways. And I don't know of any other vessels being made with all ancient materials methods in the Pacific at this time. So Taumako stands out in that regard.
There are some comments, Mimi, in the chat channel from Vince.
Well, let me get over there. I'm sorry, I was in the wrong.
No problem.
Can't see the chat. What do I have to do? Get rid of this?
Chat in the bottom.
Oh yeah, there it is. There it is, chat. Okay. Yeah, still processing the idea of pandanus flexibility and adjustment to wind. Or let me see if I can see. Oh yeah, different forces. For the spar and boom design, the ratios to hull and hull lines. Switch to sail material from pandanus was a no-brainer. Yeah, I know, but in Taumako, they prefer pandanus. And when they used to sail in Kiribati, they were very clear that they preferred pandanus, that it was faster. And the texture, it's just like having bumps on the hull. It makes it faster. Having a smooth hull is not faster. That's why even the Navy has texture on their hulls. And it's the same thing with sails. The pandanus texture creates a barrier so that it's more effective aerodynamically.
It's like golf.
Yeah, like golf balls, yeah.
And humpback whales flukes.
Yes. Exactly.
They create turbulence that it works like wet ball bearings.
Specific to each island. But bringing up the point, is that Vince? Yeah, Vince is bringing up the point about specific to each island. Absolutely. Absolutely, there are differences. But we really need a lot more attention and knowledge of the range to begin to, I mean, there's a lot of knowledge still out there, even though people are dying every day who know plenty, that we, and the young people want it, and the young people want to document it and use it. And yeah, so far support is very hard to get. So for design people, are you interested? I think maybe now we're out of time. Yeah, we are. I better be quiet. Thank you very much, everybody. We'll stick around for the Q&A at the end.
Well, good evening, and thank you for this opportunity to share with you some of the lessons learned that we had when we were building the canoe. But first, I want to preface this presentation with this statement, that we did not have the privilege of having our grandfathers and our great-grandfathers passing on traditional knowledge, because there was a void in our history where that was lost. For 300 years, we had the colonial period, and many cultures were lost, specifically the seafaring culture. But because of a drawing that we discovered, we were able to revive some of that lost knowledge. And today, I want to share with you what we have learned. But first, a story. When considering building the canoe, we went to Maui to learn from the experts. And in that visit, we joined the group, and in the process of building the canoe, we were introduced to the string. And this string, change it. this string really was the measure, the unit of measure for the canoe. In fact, the chief tells me that the keel of the canoe has a certain length, and he would grab a piece of string equal to that length. And from that length of string, everything fell out. Well, in that one day that we were helping, Mr. Chief Bruno asked me to measure the distance from the keel all the way to the end of that boom. And guess what? He used a string, and I'm going to use this board to show that. We measured the bottom of the keel to the end of the boom. Pinching the string, he already determined the length of that distance. Then he went up and had me hold the string at the gunnel. And then he pinched the other measure. And that's already division, subtraction. This is the difference between those two lengths. Then guess what? He folded that string. And that's division by 2. And that division by 2 resulted in the separation between the boom and the outrigger. And I said, wait a minute, could there be more mathematics involved in the building of the canoe other than this newfound data? Well, we did discover a lot more. And the story that I'm going to share with you is exactly all the different relationships. In fact, change. In fact, what I'm going to do today is share with you some of the relationship, the mathematical relationship of one part of the canoe to the next. And this is what I'm going to define as affinity. Next slide. We built a canoe, and here's the canoe. It's we built it in 2011, 47 feet long. Next. There she is, getting into the waters of the Marianas, 47 feet long, 5,600 pounds, and it only takes 18 inches to displace that weight. She was ready to rock and roll. When we were out in Guam, we actually sold her. We sold her to her limits. Next. And there we are, getting ready to go out into the deep. But you know, this story is not about the experiences we had and enjoyed while we were out in Guam. It is what we discovered later on, after the fact, as we were building the canoe. Next.
Wait. I know, because
next. This is the ancient drawing that we discovered in the archives. It is from this drawing that we were able to build the canoe. Now, when we were building the canoe, we were literally, we were working with math on proportional and racial proportion, trying to figure out what the sizes are for each part of the canoe. Then after we built the canoe, we stepped back, and now with the privilege of having hindsight, we looked at the canoe from this distance and maybe backed up a little bit more and saw a little bit more. We saw some affinity, some relationship between one part of the canoe to the rest. And I'm going to share that. Well, if we just measure the length of the canoe, we can use string, or we can use a measuring tape. Our forefathers would frown on us using measuring tape, but so be it. We take the measuring tape and come up with a length of about 53.5. And then we measure the keel. Oh my gosh, it comes out to 35.5. If we take the ratio of those two lengths, we come out with 1.5. That's equivalent to 3 divided by 2. How cleanly did that relationship come out? Can it improve? Is there others? Yeah, well, we look and we're using string again because it makes our ancestors proud. And we find that the keel, the length of the keel is equal to the length of the mast from the bottom up. And it's equal to the leach of the sail is equal to the luff of the sail. And we fold that distance in half, that length in half, and that's equal to the size of the beam, the main beams. Whoa, wait a minute. We use the same measure, and it's equal to the brace, the shore that holds up the mast. So there's a lot of relationship that you can see just from a distance. These are relationships that we feel are mathematical relationships because they tell us a story. They tell us a story that the canoe was designed simply. It was designed with purpose in mind. In fact, if you look at the canoe, it's a frog with triangles all over the place. The purpose of those triangles are, one, to provide rigidity, support, structure, form, and function. Well, our ancestors knew about that. George Anson provided us this drawing back in 1742. It was from this very drawing that we are learning more about the canoes of our ancestors. You see, we learn more about the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria in school, more than the very vessels of our own people. But today we're going to make a difference. We're looking now using string theory to understand more the connection between the keel to the rest of the canoe. Next slide. And I'm going to use the word affinity because it really describes the key word that we're working with, a similarity of characteristics suggesting a relationship, mathematical relationship. Next. Here's the keel. This is 32 feet long. That became the backbone of the canoe. When you build a canoe, do you start building the canoe by, let's say, building the mast? No. Do you start building a canoe with the sail? Nah. Do you start building the canoe with the outrigger? No. You start with the keel. And there is so much logic because the keel is the first thing that you work with. And from then on, you have the whole canoe. The canoe builder, when he finds the keel selected tree in the forest, he cuts the tree down, he has the keel. He already knows by looking at the keel what the whole canoe looks like. He knows the length, he knows the mass, he can picture the sail, he can picture the outrigger. The outrigger has to be greater than the keel size. So all these affinities work together to describe and define the canoe. What I'm coming up with is this relationship, that the Sakman is a function of the keel, a mathematical relationship. Next. Okay. Here we have all the affinities summed up. We said the canoe length is equal to 3/2 of the keel. The main boom is about half of the keel. And all the other relationships add up to the description of the canoe itself. Next. And there's more. We started this presentation with a story about the Maui trip that I took. Well, that also applies that if I took the distance from this point to the end of the boom, subtracted the distance from these 2 points, I would have the exact distance of separation from the boom to the top of the outrigger. Math is alive and well, and it's, you know what, it's right here. Our ancestors knew it. We didn't know they knew it, but they knew it well. They had the practical sense of mathematics. And then I mentioned there on that last slide that the leach and the luff are equated to the length of that keel. Isn't that beautiful that you can build a canoe just based on one piece of wood? That's remarkable. Next. You know, the proof is really in the product, the end product. And there she is. She's out floating, providing us more information on our ancestral past. Now, QED, quod erat demonstrantum, right? Means it is finished, it is done, it is proven. Well, next picture would kind of summarize up. Now, when I turn around and look for my elders who can give me the wisdom of old, they're not there. I have to look at myself. I am now the elder. I am a man with a string. It's my now responsibility to share with the next generation the things that we have discovered, the things that we have learned, whether it's through error or whatever, but learning be it. Yes. We built little canoes like you see here, just to get the kids hands-on, get them immersed in the art of canoe building or in the joy of canoe building. Here we have two kids learning the ropes, literally. Next. And then we have a very young kid. He's only about 3 years old, but he is involved. Here's our sacred duty. That as the Tatasi, the seafaring elders, our sacred duty now is to pass on that knowledge that we are accruing, we are learning, we are discovering to the next generation. We literally are resurrecting these knowledge from the ashes. Why? Because George Hansen burned that canoe and left it in the island. Now, thank God, we are here to express our appreciation for the mathematics that's embedded in this canoe. Thank you very much for listening. We have been very proud of what we have done. Thank you so much. Okay.
If we could just stay with Mario for a second to see if you might have to turn the towel.
What we want to do right now is quickly show the canoes that our young kids put together. And this is the product. They took two canoes, built it out of corrugated sheet that you can get from Home Depot, with all the hardware from Home Depot, even the sealant from Home Depot, the nuts and bolts from Home Depot. It's designed so that kids can build the canoe with their hands, with a little mentoring, with some tools that they can get from their garage, and some equipment that they can get from a local store, be it Home Depot. When they got the canoe together, they said, Uncle Mario, it's very unstable. I'm glad that they can figure that out. But you know what? They needed to find a solution. I said, how do we fix it? They put two little pieces of and this is another model of a 3-foot model for canoe of the Sakman that we built. We built this for education purposes, so that we can work with a class, an audience, and share with them the layout of our playground. And our playground is the ocean, but you know what? We have to pay respect to the wind. Knowing where the wind is could be a lifeline. Not knowing where the wind is could be disastrous. So here we showed with the layout of all the directions that one canoe can approach the wind, given that this kind of canoe is peculiar because the outrigger is designed that it be towards the wind at all times. Otherwise, if the wind were to impact the sail from this direction, it would just capsize. So this is just a learning tool to visualize where you are and to visualize the three winds that are affecting. You have the true wind, you have the headwind, and then you have the resultant wind called the apparent wind. If you know where these are, then you can have better sailing and enjoying it. That's what we're doing, and we're glad to be part of your evening. Okay, Mr. Simon.
And next we'll move to Simon Penny. And I would also just like to, as we transition to Simon's presentation, just to acknowledge that we are also joined tonight by Vince Diaz, Professor Vince Diaz from the University of Minnesota. So welcome, Dr. Diaz. On to you, Simon.
Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for doing this. Fantastic to hear the presentations of my friends Mimi and Mario. And I will cover some of the same ground from perhaps slightly different perspectives. So I'm going to share my screen and go to a series of PowerPoints now. Right. So my presentation is called Indigenous Maritime Science and Sustainability, the Lama Track Proa, and the Orthogonal Project. I'll spend about 15 minutes speaking about the first and then about 5 minutes speaking about the second. I wanted to begin with a map of the Pacific and the location of the Lama Track Atoll. This is a view of the Western Pacific. As you can see, the Federated States of Micronesia are located north of Papua New Guinea and south of the Marianas, and east of the Philippines. East of the Philippines, and further to the east, the Great Pacific spans out in its majesty for another 5,000 miles until it runs into Baja California, Mexico, and the United States. So this part of the paper is based on a paper I wrote called Canoe Carving Lama Track Style, an interdisciplinary study in crafting, design, engineering, and sustainability, which itself was based on some field work I did in Yap in the Federated States of Micronesia a couple of years ago. So here are two Yapese proa on Colonia Harbour. These are the kinds of boats I'm going to be speaking about, and it's important to note that they are very similar in style to the Sakman which Mario was talking about. Of course, they're in the same geographical area. Now, the canoe carvers of Lama Track Atoll are one of the few Pacific communities whose canoe carving, ocean seafaring, and indigenous navigation techniques are living traditions. They sail long distances in open ocean in these crafts without instruments or maps, using traditional navigation techniques. And as Mario pointed out, their building procedures involve no plans, no measuring devices or numbers. This kind of indigenous boat building and seafaring was once practiced virtually all over the Pacific, but the traditional knowledge has been eradicated in all but the most isolated and impoverished communities, sad to say. Now, I'm a sculptor, a sailor, an amateur shipwright, and what I observed when I was in Lama Track is that I was able to understand some of the things that the canoe carvers were doing because of my experience in these fields, and it made me realize that someone with a kind of book-learned anthropological education simply couldn't have the insights into some of these techniques that I observed. Here is another Yapese proa on Colonia Harbour. Now, the point I want to make, the key point I want to make, is that the designs of proa are radically non-Western. Virtually every quality of the design of the proa contradicts Western maritime design procedures. It's also important to know that they are efficient, environmentally adapted, and very fast. They have extremely shallow draft, permitting them to sail over reefs, across shallow lagoons, passages, and estuaries, and, as Mimi remarked, be easily drawn up on the beach for maintenance or safety in storms. What's important about that is that they are highly adapted to a world of lagoons and atolls, a world without deep harbours. And this was something of an epiphany to me, that I realised that the only islands that Westerners had successfully colonised in the Pacific, or at least established major centres, were islands that had deep water harbours. It's also important to recognise that the deep V hull shape works against the leeway potential of the shallow draft, compensating for the need of a deep keel or foil. Now, we've been talking about tacking and shunting. I want to explain one of the reasons why the geometry of these boats and the design of these boats, the topology of these boats, is so different from Western boats. So a Western boat can swing its rig from side to side, and in order to move upwind, it follows this kind of snaking, tacking pattern that you're seeing in the left side diagram. The outrigger craft have to proceed rather differently because they have an outrigger only on one side, and the outrigger has to remain to windward at all times. So to move upwind, these boats have to stop and reverse, moving the rig to the other end of the boat. Sounds slightly laborious, and indeed it is. The important point here is that the axis of symmetry of oceanic shunting craft is 90 degrees rotated from the axis of symmetry of Western craft. You can see here the axis of symmetry of a proa, where the so-called front and back, if you like, are mirrors of each other, whereas in the Western craft, the left side and the right side are mirrors of each other. This difference also carries through into the question of ballast. In the oceanic craft, the ballast is very efficiently located on a horizontal lever arm, so that a minimum amount of ballast will have a maximum amount of righting effect. The Western keel boat, in contrast, has the ballast directly below the centre line of the boat because it has to be bilaterally symmetrical. And what's necessary there is a volume of air, a flotation volume, that at least counterweights the mass of the keel, which results in a much more massive hull shape. So these are some of the key qualities of the asymmetrical proa craft. They shunt, the axes of symmetry are rotated, the ballast is on a horizontal lever arm, they have minimal underwater surface and volume. They also have cross-sectional asymmetry of the hull, something that we haven't talked about, but it's one of the characteristics which is possible for a boat that doesn't have to be bilaterally symmetrical, and it is advantageous. Now, these things together comprise a thoroughly integrated design theory that is radically different to, or orthogonal with respect to, Western designs, and it is highly adapted and adaptable to Pacific conditions. Here's a close-up view of the outrigger, the TAM, of a mid-sized Yapese proa, and it's very interesting to examine the complexity of the lashing and this kind of complex yoking design, which produces a kind of fore and aft suspension system for the TAM, the outrigger, so that it can actually rock. And one of the issues with these boats is that because they are lashed together, there are no fasteners at all, no nails, no screws, no bolts. because the boats are lashed together, they have a kind of inherent flexibility, which softens shock that's experienced from the seas and even from beaching. Here's another view of the that same proa floating in the lagoon, and you can see that the outrigger or the tam is actually being held up with floats because it's heavier than the water. So it's not really a hull at all. It's truly a ballast outrigger. So the designs demonstrate sophisticated understanding of hydrodynamics, and they deploy complex polyhedral tensegrity structural triangulation. The hulls have specialized shapes which improve speed, maneuverability, and tracking. Not only are the arrangements of the hull and the outrigger asymmetrical, but the hull itself is bilaterally asymmetrical, and that asymmetry counters the drag of the tam or outrigger, which would cause the boat to slew if the hulls were symmetrical. This asymmetry, like an airplane wing on end, causes the hull to crab or climb to windward. This is analogous to the lift gained by an aerodynamic wing in the air. So if these hulls have all of these sophisticated qualities, they are indeed technologically sophisticated. Here's a view showing the asymmetry of the hull. Now it's rather subtle, but the side on the left, which is the lee side, is flatter than the side on the windward side, in the same way that an aeroplane's wing would be to create lift. Now, as Mimi has said better than I can, Pacific boat building is a situated technology. It's important to recognize that all of the materials were sourced locally, quite obviously. But there is recent genomic archaeological evidence that settlers carried and cultivated crops of special value in canoe making. Now, as Mario elaborated in the case of the Sakman, the Lama Track sailing canoe is also, the hull is made of 5 pieces: a keel log, 2 side planks, and 2 prows. And then to this are added the crossbeams, outriggers, decking, and other parts. And once again, it's important to emphasize that these are all lashed together. So, and as Mimi has said better than I can, the making of the canoe entails many sequential or concurrent tasks involving the entire community, including planting a garden, growing the sail materials, and of course, stewarding the forest where the various kinds of trees that are needed for the canoe construction have been growing quite possibly for generations. So in all of these cases, the entire island is in a sense a kind of, if you like, standing reserve for the construction of the seagoing craft. Now, I'm lucky enough to have some photographs of building of a substantial canoe in Yap by a community of diasporic Lama Track craftspeople, and here they are roughing out the main hull in the forest. And as you can see, the only tool they're using is the traditional Pacific adze, which is an extraordinary tool, and virtually all of the work in the entire building process is done with these Pacific adzes. Now, the keel piece is visualized in the tree trunk before felling. The location of the keel log in the tree is understood before the log is felled. And there's an understanding of how the environmental effects on the tree have caused the movement of the heartwood or the positioning of the heartwood in the trunk such that there'll be strength in certain parts. And that's all taken into account when the particular tree is chosen and the particular part of the tree that will comprise the keel log. Now, the canoe carvers also recognize that when the tree is felled, the shock of felling may well induce splits, which may be a crosswise split like an L, or two crosswise splits like an X, or a Y-shaped split. And they take this into account before they start to carve the keel log out of the trunk in order to preserve the strongest parts of the hull, the strongest parts of the trunk for the parts of the hull that need the strength most. Here, the guys chipping one of the side planks, and as you can see, they've chosen a length of the wood in which the branch itself was curved, and that curvature follows the curvature of the hull shape. Once again, you see the adzes being used. Of course, the other parts of the tree will be identified for other parts of the canoe. The prows, the parts will be identified for the prows, and certain areas in the tree where the trunk is bent, or where a branch is bent or has a knee in it, will be used for particular places, because of course if the grain of the wood bends, it makes a particularly strong part. In this case, they're using breadfruit wood. Mangrove wood is preferred for the hull, but it's rarer and more valuable. And the mangrove wood is very heavy, so that's used for the outrigger. But it is mangrove wood is full of minerals, so it blunts the tools very quickly and rusts them. So here again, some gentlemen roughing out the prow piece. Now, in Lama Track, they also use the string method that Mario has described. They take the length of the roughed out keel log as a string, and they divide it into 4 sections, folded 3 times to make what we would call eighths. What's interesting about the way they name it in Lama Track is that the 2 ends and the fold points are named, giving a total of 9 points on the string, which they refer to as the 9 men. And in the knowledge about the layout of the canoe, as Mario has pointed out, the keel string is used for diverse measurements, almost all the measurements of the entire boat, and it's also used for inscribing arcs. Now, so all the proportions, angles, and arcs of the canoe are marked out using a single piece of string. There's no use of standardized measurements for lengths or angles. There are no numbers, no inches, no centimeters or degrees, and no drawn plans. There's a series of procedures. Now, what's interesting about this, from a kind of comparative archaeological point of view, is that this modality of proportional geometry was the same geometry that was identified by Pythagoras, that was used in the design and building of the pyramids of Egypt and the great Gothic cathedrals. In fact, the numeralization of design mathematics only occurred in the West in the Renaissance. So in a sense, these Lama Track canoe carvers are using a modality of mathematics that built some of the greatest architectural edifices in the world. I think I'm doing okay for time. I'm just going to go a little quicker now. Here is the traditional way to get the planks and other parts out of the forest. And that's one of the reasons why they rough the material out in the forest, because big blocks of green wood are heavy And if you make them lighter, that's good, but you don't want to make them too light because they might warp, or when in the process of seasoning. So they rough them out, and then they take them down to the water where they season the logs in the salt water for 3 months. This both seasons the wood and it also kills any bugs that might be in the wood. Interesting to observe that their approach to seasoning and to preventing the wood from splitting is quite radically different from the traditional Western approach of quarter sawing and seasoning. In Lama Track, when they carve the keel log, they carve out the heartwood and they leave two sides so that those sides are not subject to the kind of splitting that a whole log would be subject to, and they leave sections of the heartwood in as kind of clamps to hold the wood in place, so it will be chipped out later. There's all kinds of sophisticated string techniques that I don't have time to go into to create that extraordinarily subtle qualities of curvature and chines in the hull. The way to get the kind of curvature of the hull is all completely understood. Nothing is left to chance. And what's important to know about the proportional system, or what's important to recognize, is that if you start with a keel log that's 10 feet long and another keel log that's 20 feet long, and you build two canoes using the string system, they will be exact scale replicas of each other. And that's kind of stunning for a system with no numbers in it and no plans. So here are the guys in the canoe house starting to do the fine carving on the keel log. You can see there that a hull thickness is marked out with a pencil line. It looks like the hull is about 6 inches thick there. Eventually, the hull will be carved down to about 1.5 to 2 inches thick. So a substantial amount of wood is chipped away, and you can see that the floor of the canoe house is covered in chips of wood, which makes quite a pleasant floor in a tropical environment. So I'm rushed through some of this stuff here. So the take-home points that I want to make is that the Micronesian canoe is an artifact of really sophisticated design and skillful crafting. It's a clean and sustainable technology, being wind-powered and using only local renewable resources. And as I said, the stunning thing about this system of proportional construction is that the craft are built to a high degree of precision, but the precision is entirely repeatable. And when I asked my mentor about design innovation, Larry Ragatel, who's a master navigator in the community, wryly remarked, "We don't copy the canoes that don't come back." And that to me spoke of a kind of design pragmatism of a tradition that has been functioning for hundreds, if not thousands of years. So, having said that, I will now switch to taking a look at the project that I've been working on for the last several years called Orthogonal. The motto of Orthogonal is design, build, sail with a dash of anthropology. And it's a project of combining traditional Pacific maritime design with modern techniques and materials to develop a sustainable coastal and inter-island transport vessel. I'm not interested in racing boats or pleasure boats. So I will queue up my second screen. So we're going to look briefly at the website of the orthogonal project. And here's a couple of pictures of orthogonal. As you can see, it is a outrigger craft, but this is a rather perverse kind of an outrigger craft because it's what's referred to wittily by sailing people as an Atlantic proa as opposed to a Pacific proa. And the idea of the Atlantic proa is that the outrigger is on the leeward side of the boat, not on the windward side, and is in fact a float rather than a ballast. This is a design that has been experimented with in the West on several occasions over the last 50 years. Only a few of them, I'm afraid to say, have been successful, so it is rather eccentric. There's a saying in the sailing world that multi-hull people are the lunatics of the sailing community and proa people are the lunatics of the multi-hull community. So the Atlantic proa people are, I suppose, the lunatics of the proa community, which makes us pretty strange. The hulls are made of a 1/2-inch marine plywood, and I'd be happy to go into detail about some of the other aspects of the design and construction of the boat. But I want to move to a couple of videos, 3D animations made by a student of mine, which show some of the ways in which this design is a hybrid of Western and traditional Micronesian designs. As has probably not been discussed in enough detail, in the process of shunting, the entire rig has to be dragged from one end of the boat to the other. That strikes me as a little bit problematic, especially for boats operating in close quarters, in harbours or whatever. Of course, many of the voyaging proas would set sail on one tack and continue on that tack for days on end. But in this case, I'm interested in making a boat that is more manoeuvrable. In this case, this is the windward side, and you can see that there are quarter-hung rudders at each end of the boat because the boat has to reverse. And rather than having a conventional proa-type sail, I've designed a sail design with 2 masts and 2 identical isosceles sails on booms, the goal being that the boat should be as easy to shunt as a Western boat is to tack. So here's a short turntable view of the craft as it may look at sea. Okay, that's interesting. I seem to have lost control of the video. So I want to show 2 quick videos of the shunting procedure. This one from overhead. The wind direction is indicated by the swell patterns on the water. So here's the boat coming into a rest position. The sails go into a rest position and they're drawn in, and then the boat takes off in the opposite direction. And here is a side view of the same maneuver. The sails are in rest position at this point, boat drifts to a stop, and then the sails are drawn in and the boat takes off. So there are clear issues in developing the maneuverability and dynamics of any eccentric craft of this kind. Here's just a few images. These are images of the rudder boxes and the flip-up rudders. Here's few images of the construction of the hull, and I'll end on passing through looking at some of these images. This is the scarfing of 4 sheets of plywood together to make 2 sheets 30 feet by 4 feet. This is the bending of the hull into shape. What was interesting about this construction method is that we bent the hull into shape before we put the internal structure in. So here's the internal bulkheads going in. I think I'll stop there and free up the cameras for any questions.
Thank you, Simon. I think we are going to move on to a presentation with Dr. Stanley Rodriguez and Ourworlds. And I'd also, right before we start, I'd like to extend a welcome to LA filmmaker Micki Davis, who's also joining us for questions and response tonight. Take it away, guys.
Okay. Hi, I'm Kilma, Lattin, founder and executive producer of Ourworlds. I'm joined by Dr. Stanley Rodriguez and Chief Technology Officer and co-founder of Ourworlds, Catherine Ng. And it's a huge honor to be here at UCSD tonight. We're learning and seeing so many things, and it's really where the crossroads happens with science, technology, engineering, math, and now culture. And so this is amazing because we found ourselves in a wonderful place. And with that introduction, I'll turn it over to Catherine Ng.
Thank you. So I had a wonderful introduction just now, so no further introduction needed. I just wanted to launch right into telling everyone about a most amazing day. So September 26th here in San Diego was the day of the Tule boat launch with Dr. Rodriguez. And before we start launching some images from it, I think I can just share the screen right now, right? Let's see. Let's go here. Back to Zoom. Share it. Okay. So, yeah, right there. And then I can go. How do I do this? Can you make this one? There we go. And I can get rid of that. Okay. So, this was a poster to advertise the events, and it took place in Mission Bay here in San Diego. And what was it like? Essentially, the community all got together and had a fabulous time. Stan, how many boats were in the water that day?
On that particular day, we had 22 Tule boats there. This is the most Tule boats that our people, the Kumeyaay people, have had in the bay in over 100 years. It was an exciting time for all of us. It started off with a project for the Boys and Girls Club on the La Posta Reservation, and then it just continued to expand. We have representatives from many of the different bands here in San Diego, along with the general public, coming out and participating and having the opportunity to actually be in one of these Tule boats, what we call Ha Kwaiyo.
Yeah, it was so incredible. And so it had great meaning for a lot of people in San Diego. And so how did you first get the idea to share this with the community? You teach at Kumeyaay Community College and at Cal State San Marcos. At the Boys and Girls Club, of course, and just a ton of community outreach. So what gave you the idea to really kind of share in this tradition with everyone?
Well, thank you for bringing that up. Our people, the Kumeyaay people, we're a people of the islands, the ocean, the valleys, the mountains, the desert, parts of the Colorado River and parts of the Sea of Cortez. So we've had a maritime culture, but due to encroachment, people have been pushed up into the hills. Now, with that said, there were Kumeyaay groups in Baja, because half of our tribe is in Baja in Mexico, and they still carried on some remnants of our maritime history. Well, that had all gone dormant. I remember Mario was talking about how there are no more elders left that know these things, and this is the same thing that we had over here. So we had to revitalize our maritime knowledge. And one of the things that we revitalized were the Tule boats, or Ha Kwaiyo. So hearing some of the stories that some of the elders said when they used to make them, and I met one elder, she used to make them before, she was from Baja. We replicated the Tule boats and started making them. So the first ones that we did was back in 2011, 2012. And it was a point where we brought the Kumeyaay from Baja and the Kumeyaay from San Diego together. It was, we had the people from the different communities make these boats, and it started to grow from there. Then we started teaching these skills at Kumeyaay Community College. One of the things that we're told is that knowledge without sharing is not really knowledge. So by doing these things, by making these boats and getting our people out there, then we're revitalizing our connection. And our connection is very important to us because, and as you would know with your people too, the ocean is in our creation story. It means so much for our people. So being able to do that has been something that is just continuing to grow. As you can see right there, we have 22 tule boats launching into Crown Point. I mean, off of Crown Point, we have people going out. Most of the people have never been in a tule boat. So this is something that's been very exciting for all of us. And as you can see, people are learning. You will learn by doing things.
Dr. Rodriguez, one of the funniest things you said that morning is when you told me that was the original Kumeyaay Navy.
Yes, that is the original Kumeyaay Navy. And I guess I'm the admiral now. So, this is something that we've had, and as we continue to develop capacity, some of the stories that the elders told me was that we would make boats big enough to hold up to 20 adults. Well, that's our next project.
Wow.
That's next summer.
Yes,
Yeah.
I hope you two are in the boat with me.
We will make sure that we are.
It'll be epic.
Yeah, no, well, now
A big man too.
yes, all the crew. So it's incredible because you've actually, you can't do this by yourself. I mean, you build a community, people have learned how to harvest the tule, people have learned how to build the boats. And so it's really just been this wonderful thing. I mean, this particular set of boats, you started maybe in the springtime, right? You harvest the tule, I just wanted to show some of the footage from the event. There were maybe 3 races, sort of like launched from the shore. And that sort of gave it an element of, fun for people who were part of the event. Just being able to compete a little bit and, just sort of be able to say, I reached the buoy the fastest. So let's see, let's just advance it here. The full screen. Oh yeah. And so, really, I think that it meant a lot to the community. There was an artist who was painting there that morning, as you know, and she created 2 paintings actually, and one of them was, of course, of all of the boats out on the water. And when I heard in our Kumeyaay class that you were interested in this painting, I know of her from Instagram, so she actually, her name is Joyce Chin. And she's a watercolor artist, and she had actually submitted this to a painting exhibition competition. And when she heard that this was a painting that was going to you, she pulled it out of the exhibition. She said, he has to have it. So it's really something that was very meaningful for her, the entire experience. So I'm really grateful to her also. Fast forward to, and this is, of course, sort of after, we packed all the boats back onto the truck. And of course, this didn't happen by itself. There were just dozens and dozens of people helping lift these boats. They're not heavy, but, you can't do 22 boats into these pickup trucks with just a crew of a few people. So this is 2012. This is the Boys and Girls Club, right?
No, actually, this right here is Kumeyaay from both the United States and Mexico.
Oh.
We came together to do a language immersion camp, and this was the first time that both groups built tule boats. We built 9 tule boats that day, and we launched them off a Spanish landing. I have to tell you the story real quick, that one of the boats was unoccupied, so there was this random family that walked by. They had a 9-year-old daughter. She jumped in and she won the competition.
That's amazing. And so, just seeing the process over the last couple of months has been really amazing. Here you are. So where is this? This is a gorgeous landscape.
This is off of Kumeyaay Lake at Mission Trails. This is where we initially got the our first 3 tule boats that we made for these 22. And we had a group of grad students from the Scripps Institute, students from Kumeyaay Community College, other volunteers, Cuyamaca Community College coming out. And we were out there and got into water waist deep and just started chopping away.
So chopping away, yeah. And so here's more of that. You know, and it takes some patience, and you know, I think you're out there with some rather large knives, so
Yes.
you have to be careful. So you know, I think I was with you on this day, and so sometimes you harvest the tule when it's green. That's preferable if you have the kind of time to let it. So tell us a little bit about the curing process. I mean, you prefer to have kind of slightly younger tule, so you can kind of shape it as it dries, right? But you know, in a pinch, you can also harvest the drier tule.
And you were out there that day when we did, and that the tule that we harvested that day, we made 5 tule boats.
Oh my gosh!
Yes.
Wow, yeah, it's
One of
amazing.
them was over, we were all there together.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, it's a really incredible message of empowerment. I mean, if you know, all the chips go down, you know, we can always just sort of go to the to one of these you know, reedy areas and harvest the tule and make our own boats and go out and fish and just you know, really kind of take control over our. And so, like, actually, this is in Cuyamaca Park, and you know, again, it's just your community helping you to build the awas, right?
Yes, and we're doing that at the visitor center. We've made 5 awas over there, 5 brush houses, a couple of ramadas, hukwin, which is an acorn storage basket, and we made a tule boat to put out there for display. This is for people coming to Cuyamaca Community Park. They can see how we live, you know, the things that we create, and you know, static display.
Yeah, traditional homesteads. And so, yeah, I mean, you know, I think the people of San Diego should be aware of this incredible resource available to them now. You've built, I saw 3, maybe 4 awas there, and they're there really permanently. And I think the plan was then in the springtime to build something larger, like a larger structure, right? Like
Yes.
a winter type of structure. Very cool. So, yeah, and then here's some of the tule that's harvested into bundles. And so really the process was amazing. I mean, you know, just being able to bundle, like you sort of start off by creating these smaller bundles, and then you kind of put them together. We should show everyone the actual boat that's here. You know, and this is, of course, community college, you know, one of the classrooms, and then here, you know, right outside of your store in Old Town Market, you know, the Kosai market. But yeah, I mean, it's taking the bundles, it's tying them together. You know, you have cordage that you can create from the tule itself, or if you have some other source of cordage. Now, should we take a look at one
In a
of these
minute,
boats?
I have a
Yeah,
few
yeah.
questions.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
So is there a way to get back to where it shows us on the panel and not the presentation, or is it happening now? I'm not
I
sure
we have to
if we're-
stop sharing. We have to
Yeah,
stop
let's
sharing.
have a quick conversation
Okay,
for a
yeah.
moment. Yeah, so Stan, let's get serious for a second, okay? So I'm from the Paula tribe, San Isabel, where, Stan, you were a Navy veteran.
Yes.
You hold 2 master's degrees. You're a professor at the community college and the state college. Now, my question is, how do you, and the where this is coming from is at Ourworlds, the company that we founded and that we're producing content for, we're using emerging technologies, artificial intelligence, augmented reality, virtual reality, point cloud, volumetric video, CGI. We're using these emerging technologies to preserve and advance culture. And it's this nexus, it's this crossroads of technology and culture. And people think of Native Americans, they think beads, drums, casinos, tobacco, tule boats, and they say, okay, that's the Indian stuff. But what people forget is that we're here now. We exist in the 21st century. We're still contributing. We're not dead in the history books, that we're out here contributing to life on a daily basis with advanced degrees, working in technology, and keeping the culture alive, preserving it, and in our case, advancing culture. So the serious conversation that I'd like to have, or just a back and forth with you, is, can culture change? Is it static, or can culture change? Number one. And number two, what things can we use for it to change? And also, from your background of strong academia and professorship, and why do you want to keep the culture alive? I know that's a big question. I ask you a lot, but I want to get your thoughts on these really deep, serious topics about culture, where we are now, where we've come, and where we're going.
Sure. Well, with your first question, nothing is static. And as we continue to grow, technology plays a big part. And with our language, our culture, it continues to grow. I remember an elder once said, our songs are not over, we're still alive. We continue to put songs into our song cycles. So just what you do with the technology that you've shown, the technology that you use, this has so much application for the preservation and for celebrating Kumeyaay culture, Kumeyaay history. Now, yes, I can make the Ha Kwaiyo, the tule boats. I can teach how to make the houses. I also have a doctorate degree. And what this shows is that we can be culturally grounded and at the same time continue to grow. I'll just throw this ball back at you. You're a pilot. That is impressive. You're a helicopter pilot. You're from the Paula Reservation. You graduated from Harvard. You've sat on tribal council. So you bring all these things. You're grounded culturally, and you have access to all these things. And by what you do is you model what it is to be a native today. I liked how you said people talk about us in the past tense, but we are here today. We are here today, and the things that you have done, things that you do, bringing to light all these things that we do, that we can know our culture, we can have knowledge of our organic science, and we can continue to reach for the stars. We can do both. So I think that by what you do with technology, the things that you demonstrate, it gives people an insight to our culture, but it also lets them know that we are people of the past, the present, and the future.
Yeah, and I really appreciate that answer. And the only follow-on I can give to that is, it takes a village, it takes a tribe to create great things. And as a culture keeper that you are, and the steward of our culture and moving us forward in the 21st century, we bring our gifts. Catherine and I will bring our gifts of production and technology so that we can create this crossroads and really become Native American futurists, looking forward to how we push our culture and our civilization forward into the 21st century, because that at this point is our role. I'm no longer a boy now. I'm becoming a man. I am a man, and I'm moving forward. And as an elder that you are, and the tribal councilman that you are, it's our torch to carry, and it's our job to educate others about who we are now and where we're going. And I know that there are those certain culture keepers that we know that want things to remain in the past. And I respect that vision. And we'll always have our history. We'll always have our traditions and our culture. And that's where we've been. But sometimes we have to look forward to the future. And I'm so grateful for the work that you do to keep our culture alive and to carry us forward into the 21st century. That being said, we've got a tule boat behind us. Should we go
We have a
back
tule
there?
boat,
And,
yeah.
Yes, let's go.
look at it.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say, both of you were there. Some people ask, how long does it take to make a tule boat? We made one in 15 minutes and 59 seconds.
Yeah, I think that's
I was a witness. It's got to be a Guinness Book of World
Yes,
Record.
we're going to
Do they
enter it,
keep
actually,
that?
yeah.
Does Guinness keep that sort of record?
Well, we had
They do
witnesses.
now.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, they do now. Guinness,
exactly.
if you're watching, I want to see somebody make a tule boat faster, because we said it in San Marcos just 2 weeks ago.
We did this.
Yeah, exactly. We have it in volumetric video.
Yeah, we do. We have it on video. Guinness.
So, it's sort of deceiving how long these really are. I mean, it was funny because when you told me, oh, it's about 8 or 9 feet, the book that we finally shot in the studio was 14 feet. So we had to adjust our speed a little bit, we made it.
We talk louder because.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
No, we did make it work, and thank you, both of you, for allowing this to happen. This tule boat, or Ha Kwaiyo, is part of our maritime culture, and as you can tell, they're not like the wooden boats that you see, or even like the diat or the toma from the Chumash or the tomba. We use the materials that we have here. In order to make it much more seaworthy, we would flip it over on the back and we would heat up tar. tar that you would find out in La Jolla. You've seen some of the things. Oh gosh, there's all this tar out there. What are we gonna do? Actually, that was a boom for us. That was a tradable item. So we would heat up the tar and put it on the bottom. That would make it watertight. Like I said, we could make a tule boat in 15 minutes and 59 seconds.
That's right. And for those of you who aren't familiar, on the coast from San Diego past Santa Barbara, if you walk on the oceans or down on the beach, sometimes you'll step on natural tar that's seeping from the shore, from offshore. So that's what he's saying.
So, yeah, I mean, it's something that I think it's easy to learn to make one of these. I mean, what's the most important thing to know? I mean, it's really just to tie it tight, you know.
Tie it tight, and as you become more proficient, it gets easier. It gets easier. So one of the things that we want to do.
Can we pick it up?
Yeah, let's pick it up. Let's see how heavy this
Let's see
is.
this thing in.
Let's see if I can get a hundred.
You need my help?
Oh, it's remarkably light.
Very light.
It's actually very light and very buoyant. I remember when I was in it, I was paddling around and it's no problem. I'm, not the lightest guy.
Yeah, they're runners out there. Yeah, they're really light. Yeah, exactly. It's lighter than a stone.
Yeah, so these boats, so this past year, we put out 22 tule boats in the bay. Next year, we want to put out 50. So
Is that including the 22 that you did this year?
including the 22.
So what sort of things did people do in a tule boat historically?
Historically, what our people would do is we would use it as a means of transportation. We would use it for fishing. We even harvested whales with these tule boats. So the process was harpoons were made and a special poison was made. It's paralytic in nature. So you would aim for a flipper of a whale coming back, because you know that San Diego, it's a natural migratory path of gray and blue whales and humpbacks. So they would hit a whale like close to the flipper, and it would go numb. And since whales are mammals, they would drown. So there would be about 30 tule boats. As soon as the whale drowned, they would lash ropes to it and tow it to the bay or tow it to shore. And then they would have runners go to different villages and people would come and have a big feast.
We have just a couple minutes. Could you share with us the digital imaging work that you did?
Sure, yes, we can. Okay, so we'll transition to how we've captured this amazing phenomenon of the tule boat and the Kumeyaay Navy
Yeah, exactly. So
in using
so
some emerging technology.
how do I get to the? Let me show the back up of the PDF. Do we? Well, it just shows. Okay, so I'm just going to. Am I sharing the screen? I'm not. Oh God. That's the Zoom. I'm going to share my screen. I'm sharing. Okay, so I just wanted to show a little bit about, so this is a juxtaposition of, boats with other boats, and it's just something to think about. And so it really captures the imagination. What we were trying to do in the studio, and this is a sort of shot of everybody who, was there that day. This is, of course, Dr. Stan and his two boys, Raymond and Hua, and some of our other contributors, Chairwoman Brandy Taylor and Dylan Luna, our musician. And so basically in the studio, we shot on green screen. We have a volumetric video depth capture process, essentially what we were able to do is capture a, volumetric shot of the boys paddling. And I'll just show it to you right here. So here it is, right here. So let me just go full screen with this. I need to play it. So what we're looking at right now is a 360 rendition of our volumetric video. And what that means is we shot, of course, the video in, actually it was in 8K. And what we're doing here is we've, Dr. Rodriguez only has 2 sons, but we cloned it.
That we know of.
No, well, who came to the shoot? I mean, he actually has more. But, so what we.
5 cents.
What we did was we actually captured, the likeness of them, rowing from different orientations. And what we're able to do is in other software such as Unity, we're able to clone, the volumetric video objects several times and have position them around. And so the effect, you can download our app beta. We're in public beta now. It's ourworlds.io/beta. And we'll be putting these activations onto, this beta this coming week. So, look for it the week of Thanksgiving. Essentially, we want to tell the story of, the tule boats and what they mean for sustainable living in San Diego and how it sort of, signifies our connection to the natural world and, all those wonderful things.
I'll say that, and before I turn it to Dr. Rodriguez, the last thing I'll say is that the reason why this imagery is significant is because it represents the merging of the past with the future in the present. And that's important for our people because as Dr. Stanley Rodriguez and I both believe that culture can change. It's not static, and we can change. And we have every right to use all available technologies to showcase our culture in a modern way. And we have been limited by traditional communication mediums such as television, print, radio. That to me, it maybe our old art forms, and now we're looking forward to the future using emerging technologies to comprehensively capture our culture in ways that, otherwise, I think we're moving beyond print, TV, and radio, just like TV replaced radio, just like, now augmented and virtual reality is replacing television. We're moving forward into the future. And so I'll turn the last words over to Dr. Rodriguez. When you see this imagery, what sort of things do you feel? How do you feel about the future? What sort of thoughts does this conjure up for you?
For me, this is an exciting time to marry our past with the future and do it here in the present. I mean, it speaks so much to the possibilities of revitalizing not just our language, but our culture and sharing it with others. This is beautiful. I mean, just watching that and to know that one day, they're going to be elders and they're going to show that to their grandchildren, their great-grandchildren. And, I mean, I'm speechless. I'm just, and what that means in Kumeyaay language is what has been done brings much happiness to my heart.
Oh,
So thank you both.
absolutely.
What a beautiful way to kind of segue into concluding our
Yes.
panel.
I'll say one more remark is that, this footage, basically it's important to us to present it in places that are contextually relevant to our viewers. So the reason why we decided to do an extended reality application on mobile devices is that so you are going out into the world, you are in the real world, and there's a lot of talk of the metaverse these days. We want to create a positive metaverse. We want to create one that's not about, commercial, about selling things, but about sharing culture and sharing really, most importantly, the context and meaning of places. And so from now on, whenever you go to La Jolla Shores starting Thanksgiving, you will be able to see these tule boats forever and ever and ever.
And that is a whole nother can of worms, is who owns the metaverse, right? It's, so we're out there, we want to create our worlds where you're interacting with the beautiful world we have been given by our creator, where you go to La Jolla Shores and you're able to interact with original Kumeyaay content, but you're doing it in a beautiful location that we've been given. So with that being said, it's been an honor to sit on a panel with you.
Truly an
sir.
honor. Yeah. Aw,
Thank you. Thank you very much.
absolutely.
Yay.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
And now we will welcome questions and comments from our panelists, as well as everyone who's joined us on the YouTube stream. Our panelists on the panel were joined by Vince Diaz and Micki, and Micki too, and also Mario is here with us alongside Stan, Catherine, and Kilma.
Okay. How many people are out there? Can we see? Can we see how many are? Is there anybody in
Yeah, I like your world.
I like your work.
Gonna-
Yes. Yeah, they can coexist.
Yes.
Okay, so we also just want to acknowledge that we're in the Design and Innovation Building at UC San Diego. It's opening today, the first day of the opening of the Design and Innovation Building. We're here in the Design Lab, the UCSD Design Lab. And so thank you all for joining us. And Joe Riley is going to continue with the facilitation of our Q&A. We'll be trying to take some questions from the YouTube channel. So if you're on YouTube and you have questions, now's the time to post them, and we'll try and shuttle them over to Zoom. Thank you. Joe.
Great. Can you read the question there?
If you can, that's good.
Well, why don't we start off with questions from Micki and Vince? Can we see them? Are they
See
on?
that? I can't.
I can.
Vince, are you there?
Oh, I can get it live.
Ah, yes.
Yeah, I can. Hey, nice to see you guys. I can,
Yeah.
I posted some questions, but I can ask it in person. But before that, I just wanted to say that this was an awesome evening, and not just each individual story, but bringing them all together, I think is amazing, and it's the way to go. One of the questions I have has to do with how different Native groups are collaborating around, in this case, canoe resurgence, for everything that's at stake in it. And I know that the Sakman Chamorro group and the Kumeyaay have some relations in the past, and I'm wondering if you're still doing that, and what else do you guys plan on doing?
I'll speak to that. I've been working with several people in the Kumeyaay group here, Kumeyaay Nation, with Barona and Sikwan, and we are still working the details out on getting the wood from Rupert Island down into San Diego via an old treaty that was used once back in the 1800s. They're trying to resurrect that to see if that treaty can help alleviate the duty that can be imposed on trade. Now, the people up in Rupert Island, through the Indian groups up there from Manitoba, are interested in helping the project of building a canoe down here, albeit a Sakman-related canoe. But the idea is to get the communities, the kids from each community, from the San Diego Kumeyaay community, as well as the San Diego Chamorro community, to work together and build a canoe. The idea is not to build any one specific canoe, but to get the youth involved so that they are into a different kind of maybe project, so that they can get away from the smartphones and all the other distractions, but focus on something that is cultural. But the problem was that we could not get the trade. The trees can come down from Prince Rupert Island, but the concern is, what do we have in trade? We had thought about using insulin as a product to trade with the Prince Rupert Indians, but that has never materialized. We're still working on it. It's not a dead idea. It's something that's really needed. So that's where we are.
To add on to that, UCSD has been amazing in the last few months that I've been involved here at helping to facilitate groups come together. I would have never met you, and in a sense, you know, we met at the Grunion Run, but that's where I met Lisa Cartwright and Nan Renner. And so UCSD has really had a nice, strong push in helping native groups collaborate, almost being like a central focal point for us to kind of rally and meet other like-minded individuals. And so that's been kind of invaluable, I know, for the Ourworlds project. And so, personally, that's been my experience the last few months is here at UCSD.
And for, as Kumeyaay, one of the things that we're working on right now is to develop a larger tule boat that we can utilize with the Kumeyaay and Baja to go to the Coronado Islands. Those islands are in Mexican territory. It's still Kumeyaay territory, but we have to navigate through, binational politics. So that's something that we're looking at doing too.
If I may, we have a question from Teresa Bernadette, who asks about the longevity of the various types of vessels discussed tonight. How frequently do they need to be maintained or replaced? What is their life, the arc of their lives like?
Well, I can talk about the Sakman. The Sakman is made out of wood, and wood invites unwelcome guests and like termites and worms and things like that. If left unattended, it will develop hotels for the termites, and we don't want to bring them on board. So the maintenance is pretty much a continuing effort where we look for any ways that these characters can move in. We try all kinds of sealants to protect painting and epoxy and everything. And but that takes an effort. Once you own a boat, it's a money drain, and especially energy drain, because there's somebody has to do the work of painting and making sure there are no termites. We cover it, we tent it as often, but there's no guarantee that they'll come in the next day.
For the Ha Kwaiyo, the tule boats, we could have problems like that, but we have to take it out of the water. We have to lift it up. We cannot leave it on the ground. If we leave it on the ground, it will immediately start to decompose. But if we dry it out, we can use it a year, 2 years. I mean, if you take good care of it. But remember this, we can also make a new one in about 15 minutes. So, there you go.
Back on the island of Saipan, the CNMI, there's 500 sails, and their effort is to replicate the canoe from resources that are less impervious to these critters called termites and other bugs. So they're making them out of fiberglass. It's long lasting. There's a little concern in the process of making them. They're lighter, but they're not as buoyant as wood. So there's a concern there. You have to build in buoyancy. But that's the long term, because you know what? Trees takes a while to grow a tree to maturity so that you can use them for a canoe. But fiberglass, man, they sell them by the sheets.
So I'm coming in this as like as an Indigenous media maker and filmmaker, and and I wanted to hear more about the visualization of the keel, or Mimi, to hear you talk about Taumako and the just the personhood of what they're not objects. These are actually people. They're our ancestors. And so I just think of it, I thought it was just such a powerful metaphor to think of like the kind of visualization of this craft that will carry us into the future. So I wanted you, maybe Simon and Mimi, to talk a little bit, maybe more about that process, but then I thought maybe everyone more broadly about just these visions, as as now you're becoming the elders, and the visions that you have for your communities.
Well, Mimi, would you like to speak to the situation on Taumako first?
Well, there are two things I think would be good to say. One is that we are actually building a composite vessel in Hawaiian Islands as a gift to the Taumako organization, Vaka Taumako, Palau Vaka Taumako Association, because they need to have a qualified, merchant marine qualified escort vessel to legally sail their traditional vessels inter-island. This is something that's come up in the last 5-6 years. And also, there are no other vessels based in that whole region that serve. And so they can actually make a modest amount of money by providing services with such a vessel that has a 13 horsepower diesel in it, which makes it into an all seasons vessel, which the traditional vessels are not. So we're hoping actually that that model will provide some inspiration for other such hybrid vessels to be built.
Then it's a Proa.
Yeah, it's a Proa. It's a Proa. So it's going to be in itself. It'll have training value for the youth. Now, regarding the ancestral character of the vessel, that I almost presented a whole presentation about showing the parts of the vessel, which are not only the arms of Lata being the sail, but the top of the sail, but you know, the face of Lata, the teeth of Lata that on each end hold the Teube bird carving in the back of which the sail is stepped. The cheeks, you know, everything on the canoe is Lata's body, and it's also the bird who helped Lata to build a canoe. And you know, we could go on for hours about that. I think that's the value of, or one of the biggest things about Taumako is, you know, their story of Lata building and sailing the canoe. It goes on for years. You know, what we are able to say in little talks and articles is just a tiny little condensed version of it, because you tell it when you're doing those things, and it tells you how to do it and what to avoid. And
Right.
Nobody, you know, makes a formula out of it like engineers do, because you have to. It's about the people. I mean, you made me cry seeing the community in those tule boats. You know, that's the value. And the last thing I want to say is that what is hardest is to have the capacity for the boats to be used, the vessels to be used, and for, you know, youth and everybody to get together to make voyages, to do, you know, everything from finding marriage partners to, you know, making partnerships and networks to make things sustainable for all the individual communities and islands and regions, you know. So that's, and the first priority right now at Taumako is to build a hale vaka, a canoe house for the voyaging school that has a permanent roof. So there's another hybrid that's going to happen, because They just lost their biggest vessel 3 years ago in a major cyclone. There was it was at another island and there was no protection for it. So the problems just magnify when you try to use the boats. So
Can I add on there, Mimi? Because I think you touched on a number of really important things that I would love to mention that we didn't really get time to talk about. You know, the thing about this stuff is that across the Pacific, there was a network of active seaways that connected all the communities. And every navigator knew the way to 8 or 10 or 20, or in some cases, more than 100 different destinations and back. And this is what tied the communities together. And there is even now a profound need for a kind of sustainable transport that is both cultural and economic. People need to get to the hospital, they need to get to the big island to go to school, they need to trade, as well as all the other cultural issues. When I was on Yap is the capital of that area of Federated States of Micronesia that includes Lama Track, which is 800 miles to the east. The only way to get from Lama Track to Yap was on this clapped out Second World War diesel tramp steamer that had been broken down in Colonia Harbour for 2.5 years when I was there. So any even basic travel between the islands has ceased. And as we enter into a period of increasing, sustainability issues, sea level rise, and the challenges and threats to these low-lying atoll communities, the availability of viable, sustainable transport systems is really profoundly important.
You raise a really, really good point, and an observation that I'd like to make is the difference in the construction of the two boats that we saw here today, with the tule boat and the other going island to island. When an island is your home and you have to go a longer distance, the boat has to be a lot more secure and stable and sturdy. And, you know, if you're going to explore from an island, you've got to use the ocean to get places. The Kumeyaay people here, remember, we've got the entire territory of the United States, Canada, Central America, Mexico. So they weren't pushing into the oceans as far as other people had to go to explore. So the tule boats, from my observation, are, obviously a lot more delicate in that they didn't need to be so seafaring and explore hundreds of miles of oceans to go find things, because the land provided here for us. And so if you look at the construction and you look at the difference between the two, one is very seafaring and the other is almost for hunting, fishing locally, not going too far out, maybe catching a whale and doing some trade and finding things and surfing in the waves and whatnot. But I was really, I'm struck by the difference of the two, but it makes sense that if you're leaving an island, you've got to have something that's going to withstand the wind, the rain, the hurricanes. And if you're going 10 miles, 20 miles, 30 miles to go to a different island or to go explore new lands, you got to have a very seafaring boat
To get back.
and to get back, right? And I think of the water, right? So anyways,
Absolutely. And I just wanted to add something that I learned when I was in Yap, that the boats, because the boats are lashed together, in terms of if you get caught in a storm, which you try not to, there's a procedure for dismantling the boat and tying all the pieces together into a long trailing collection of timbers, which functions as a sea anchor. And the crew actually flood the hull and sit in the water up to their shoulders until the storm passes, and then they reassemble the boat and sail on, which is, a fantastic survival technique.
I think all of us, yes, there's a big difference in the vessels that are, not going far out to sea. But all of us are faced with the borders that divide communities and people. And you can't just follow the river or, the coast and get very far without getting those issues. And also all of us have the need for, having access to the water. And perhaps that's not such an issue for Kumeyaay. I don't know. Maybe I didn't hear that said, but it's.
I do want to comment about the tie with the ancestral spirits. As Dr. Rodriguez mentioned here, in the language of old, you actually connect with the spirits of old. We are also content with that if you build your culture, your language also comes along because each beget the other. Now, in our effort with building the canoe, we built the hardware, but the software, the language comes with it. And that's our connection with the spirits of old. If we start using the vernacular to describe, to tell the story, as our ancestors did many, many centuries ago, then that's honoring them. That's being part of their spirit. So that's the way the Sakman project is pursuing the connection, because now we are learning more of the vocabulary of old that have been void in our lexicon for centuries because there was no Sakman around. Now that the Sakman is alive and well, the language is alive and well. And because that, we are connecting and we are honoring our ancestral spirits, giving them gratitude for their legacy.
We have a question from an audience member here. June, would you like to ask a question?
Hi. I've been reading about the, Aztec mythology and the calendar and about the different suns. And honestly, my question is how has the mythos sort of influenced the connections that people create, and especially the seafaring activities? How does that come in relation to the stories that are told?
Thought this might be a good question for Vince Diaz to field. Vince, are you hearing the question?
I missed the question. It's muffled because of the mask, and I have headphones. If you could just ask it.
Yeah, just be closer to the.
So what's what's the cultural and sort of mythological influence behind the development of vessels, and how do they facilitate connections between people? That's the question.
Questions. That's a great question. Let me take two stabs at it, and I'm sure that all the panelists have good answers as well. The first one is just the fact that as crafts for travel, it literally makes possible the connectivity. So that might sound like a no-brainer, but when you remember that, or when you understand that when you understand that the crafts and the technology that we're talking about and the full diversity of native watercraft are extremely diverse, and that diversity is connected to the locale. So whether it's tule or outriggers or whatever, the full here in the Great Lakes and Mississippi River area, we're also talking about dugouts and birch bark canoes. But in the full diversity, what's actually remarkable about the canoes as connectors that bring people together is that these canoes are first and foremost products of the local environment, and their design is adapted, is informed by and adapted to the specifics of the local environment. Now, what's remarkable about that is two things. The diversity, that because of the diversity of environments, that's connected to the vernaculars. And I'm really glad to hear Mario call attention to how the revitalization of the canoe also is a prompt for revitalizing language and bringing it back to life as well. I think that's absolutely true, because canoes are tangible connections between the people and their locale, and that's vernacular. Canoes are vernaculars. They're kind of languages, and so don't lose this interesting idea that these crafts and vernaculars that emerge from local conditions are the very things that make people, that allow people to travel beyond the local, to go past the horizon, and thereby make the connections with other people. So the crafts are extremely important in how it's no surprise that crafts are where water is really important, and all around. The canoes are expressions of the people. Across the Pacific, there's a famous saying: the people is the canoe, and the canoe is the people. And that's a very profound thing, and that has everything to do with the kind of diverse technologies and designs that we're talking about. And I just want to make one more point. The question of what canoes have to do with connecting people to each other, that I'm trying to also connect to people's connections to their specific lands through, and that as vernacular, has to do with how these technologies themselves, a mark of their diversity is the fact that they've also been able to innovate for thousands of years. And so the question of like traditional canoe technology is not, it doesn't lend itself to simply thinking about the past as something back there, and the future something that's to come, that linear sense, and for which we need to look at immersive technologies, for example, as the mark of the future. Canoe technology at its roots was always about innovation. And it was that innovation that allowed people to travel and to make connections. That's the point I wanted to get at. And the vernacular is the key to understanding that technology and design questions.
I wanted to share something really nice that you said today about vernacular and sharing it. So the Canoe Building and the Ha Kwaiyo Building is so intergenerational. So, you have people of all ages that are brought together by these activities, and the memories that are fostered, the community that's fostered. And you said that you had some participants who were as young as 4.
Yes.
And you were teaching them the traditional words for
Yes.
the process of the book building. And you can imagine what that means to have some of those be the first memories that you might have. You start to remember things around the age of 4 or 5.
So
It's really wonderful.
I was just asked a great question off camera by my friend Seth over there. He asked a great question. He said, so how is what you're doing at Ourworlds advancing culture with the canoes or the tule boats. And what we do at Ourworlds is we preserve and advance culture. So what we're doing with the tule boats with Stan is preserving the culture and giving it in a very modern and futuristic way. And the way that we're advancing the culture would be something like with a hand game that you would play, like peon or a stick and hand game, where people would play it physically. But now what we've been able to do is digitally recreate that so people can play from one reservation to another using their mobile devices. So that's how we would advance culture. So the project that we're working on is preserving and advancing culture by looking at different ways that we can apply emerging technologies to our culture and our civilization.
And I just wanted to say one thing also, that for the Kumeyaay maritime culture that has almost gone dormant, goes back to our creation story. Creators came from the ocean, and our people used tule boats to cross the Sea of Cortez. We would island hop all the way there and all the way back to Kumkak, where the series would do the same thing. So although they are fragile, they're also very durable too. And it goes back to what you were saying. People used what they had in order to navigate through the world. So I just want to share that point.
And Vince, I want to add to what you just said, that, well, we always contend as islanders that if anyone wants to know more about the culture and the language of an island, look at its canoes.
Yep.
Look at its canoes.
Yep.
It defines the island.
Yep.
And you know what? That is very true.
Yep.
Just wanted to say one more thing about advancing the culture also is that we are committed to really having the narratives come from our Native American contributors, because it's really, there are many types of knowledge transfer. And, I think in Indigenous culture, there are many types of communications that are really best served by things like emerging realities. And so what we're able to do is create a platform that has workflows, and eventually there'll be, tools in the app where, our Native content contributors or stakeholders could tell their stories. And really that is advancing the culture. I mean, using these new technologies, empowering, sort of new generations of STEM learners, even just to, get, power to learn 360, to learn, immersive technologies like, volumetric video, and like all of those types of things that really, are going to, not only, advance technology or the culture, but, they have, I think great, meaning, for young students, for the workforce, for the future workforce.
And that's incredible.
And Catherine, I want to let you know that an Englishman, I'm going to summarize this loosely. He said in his book, these Indians are no ways defective in understanding, for their flying canoes, in particular in ages past, have been the only vessels used by them. He's talking about the cumulative Indians, I'm sure, because he's seen them. And that it would do honor to any nation, however dexterous and acute. And that's where we fit in.
I absolutely hate to bring this conversation to a close.
What?
But I'm sure it will continue. The canoes will continue. The conversations will continue. I can think of no better
Then a closing by the Dr. Stan Rodriguez. If you can close us out, sir.
American bow, being your way, Kamich Pei, your boom never out your one much school yard, your Ha Kwaiyo, your boom a canal, Mamblimarad, your boom your weight, your air charge of booking. My your way, the song, my hamep show, a hankanam, your boom a soak, your way to woo. And what I said is, thank you, Creator, for allowing all of us to come here today and to share our knowledge, because knowledge without sharing is not really knowledge. To share with everybody here, and we learn from each other. And as we continue to grow, we will touch others. I ask that the Creator bless us all in our minds and our hearts and our bodies, and gives us safe journeys home until we see each other again. Thank you.
Amen. Thank you. Good way. Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you for bringing that.
Okay, it's like 10 o'clock.
10 o'clock?
No.
Beer now? What is it, beer time?
It's almost midnight.
Thanks for for joining us.
Thank you, Mimi.
Mimi, thank you for joining us. Micki.
Thank you, Mr.
So
Ortagano.
great to have you with us.
Vince, appreciate you joining us. Thank you.
Always good to see you guys.
Vince,
Yeah.
Vince and Micki, we haven't met, but I'm very pleased to meet you both
Yes, same here.
online, and I hope we interact more in the future.
Yes, absolutely. I've heard a lot about you. I have friends in common, and so it's so nice to meet you virtually, but I can't wait maybe to meet you in person one day.
Perhaps, hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully, yeah.
We live in hope.
Yes.
Good night, everybody.
Oh, good night.
Together.